How's everyone doing? Really enthusiastic. I want to first of all say congratulations to the two people here in the second to the front row. You're the bravest people in the room because everybody else is way back there. There's all these seats up here, and I asked all the panelists, and none of them bite, although some of them throw things, the lawyers. So just know that you're probably safe back there, but if you wanted to move up, you can. And we're going to be doing this for about half an hour with the discussion here. I first of all just want to say thanks to Kelly, to the Global Center, and to Sam Houston for having me here to do this. It's obviously an important topic that we're discussing tonight. I think it's really creative that the university is presenting it in this forum, so there's a little entertainment along with some really life and death important information, and it's pretty unique and something that you should be proud of here at the school. I want to thank you again for having me here. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists this evening, so please hold your applause until all of the panelists are seated. We're going to begin first up with Professor Dennis Longmire, a faculty member here in the college's College of Criminal Justice. He's been faculty for 30 years and has filled multiple leadership roles in the college. His research focuses on all dimensions of the criminal justice system and specializes in corrections, the death penalty, and public perceptions of crime and criminal justice. Dennis Longmire. Jeff Blackburn, okay, so here's an attorney, so remember the thing about throwing stuff, is the founder and chief counsel of the Innocence Project of Texas. In 2009, he handled the case of Timothy Cole, a young man who died in prison after falsely being accused of rape. Jeff obtained the first posthumous DNA exoneration in Texas history with this case. Interestingly, I met Jeff in 2009 when I worked for CBS News as the family of Timothy Cole was meeting Governor Perry, who then went on to officially pardon Timothy Cole. I should also tell you that Jeff Blackburn is responsible for getting 49 innocent people released from prison. Jeff. And finally, please welcome Anthony Graves, also known as Death Row Exoneree number 138. Anthony was wrongfully convicted of murder and served 18 years behind bars, 12 of those on death row before being exonerated by DNA evidence in 2010. He continues to serve as an advocate for those who are wrongfully incarcerated through his foundation, Anthony Believes. And if you saw the t-shirts out front, I can tell you that's a way to support his cause. It's tax deductible. It would be great for you to buy a t-shirt. They're on sale, and you can purchase them during the intermission, and that goes to his foundation, which is dedicated to helping at-risk kids and keeping them from being a part of this system. Anthony. And if you could give all of our panelists a This is kind of cool. I usually have a teleprompter, which allows me to look cool, like I don't have to look down and read stuff, and I don't have to wear my reading glasses. But I'm just gonna do it the old school way tonight. Tonight we're going to examine the social injustice of individuals who are tried, convicted, and incarcerated for crimes they didn't commit. Since 1989, there have been more than 1,000 exonerations in the U.S. In fact, just last week, a New York City man was freed after serving 24 years in prison for a murder that occurred in New York while he was on vacation in Florida. Texas, by the way, ranks third in the U.S. for post-conviction exonerations, which, you know, that sounds like good news at first. You think, oh, we're getting it right, but I'm not sure it's good news, right? Because we don't want to be ranked that highly for having that many innocent people in prison. Sentences in those times have ranged from 4 years to life in prison or even death. Exonerations often come years or decades after the sentencing, as we saw, leaving innocent people behind bars for what might be the majority of their adult lives. Some even die or are executed before they are exonerated. These staggering facts are why we are here today having this important conversation. I also want to say that we did have one other panelist who was going to be joining us tonight, and she was sick today, so our apologies that she's not here. But if we can, let's begin now with some introductions, and Dennis Longmire.
I hate to say it, but thrilled to be here. This is one of those difficult situations. It's not a happy topic, but it's an important topic for us to discuss. I've been a professor here in the College of Criminal Justice for 30 years, in spite of my youthful appearance. And since coming to Huntsville, I have been actively involved in opposition to the death penalty. I stand in vigil in opposition to the executions as we carry them out. I'm also actively involved in a research project with myself and 3 colleagues, Steve Kovler, Howard Henderson, and Kim Schnurbush, a doctoral student who finished her dissertation under my direction, examining wrongful convictions. And so as the discussion goes on, I'll be talking about some of the information we've learned examining a random sample of 350 wrongful convictions out of 1,000 that we were looking at, talking about what we found in that particular research.
Jeff.
Well, first of all, thanks again for having, I think, all of us up here. I think this is going to be quite an evening, and I'm really very happy to see all of you guys turn out, especially on Saturday night. But I'm convinced that's probably because of the music. We'll try to give you a little information. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, civil rights lawyer. I have been for about 30 years. And I can tell you that in doing that, I think that most of us look at this issue and we look at individual people, people like Anthony, who I've been privileged to represent as well. And we say that's a terrible tragedy, just like the movie played out. But what we have to look deeper at is the system that did that and why. And I don't think we can have a discussion about that. Because the truth is that it's reassuring to us to think of these cases and these tragedies as accidents that can somehow be corrected. That's magic thinking. The truth is, this is a result of a system that's designed to convict people and doesn't really care whether it convicts the right one or not. Now, there's some progress that can be made, but we have to understand exactly how the system works and what it does as a system and get away from looking at it as a string of individual tragedies. We have to look at the structure and the real problem for what it is, and I hope we can do that tonight. And again, thank you. I think this will be a very useful discussion.
Anthony.
Wow. My name is Anthony Graves. I think most of you know my story. In 92, horrible crime had taken place. 6 people were murdered, 4 were children. 1 was a teenage daughter, 1 was a grandmother. They were shot, stabbed, bludgeoned to death. Gasoline poured over their bodies, house burned down, in an effort, I guess, to cover up the crime. That was an outrage about it. The prosecutor went out and said, based on his experience, he felt that more than one person had to do it. That's the way they proceeded with the case. A week later, I was arrested because a young man who was forced to give a confession ended up calling my name, thinking that it would let him get away and that they wouldn't arrest me. Hours later, there was a knock on my door. They were coming to arrest me. No investigation to find out whether the guy was lying or not. I was taken to the police station, charged with capital murder. Spent 2.5 years in jail. Ended up getting convicted and sentenced to death. I was on death row for 12.5 years. Witnessed over 350 executions. Guys that I knew, guys who became like family to me. I watched them young, healthy, being taken out and slaughtered like pigs in the pack. That's our system. I did that for 12.5 years, watched guys lose their minds, cut their throat, drop their appeals, you name it. And then finally I was exonerated. And I was exonerated in 2010. And ever since I've been traveling the globe trying to educate people about the need for criminal justice reform. And so that's why I'm here today, and thank you guys for inviting me.
So obviously we talk about the need for reform. Jeff, you said the system is acting as it was designed to act. I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that because I think I'm pretty much Joe citizen, and I'm not involved in the legal system. Obviously, as a reporter, I may see it a little more often than most normal people. But like a lot of people, I want to believe that the system works. That, of course, there are tragic mistakes when people are wrongfully convicted, but that in general, from the police officers investigating to the prosecutors, the judges, that the system is designed to find the truth. But you don't believe that's the case?
Well, I think it is designed to find that way. I got to tell you, in the beginning, before I really started doing this kind of work, when I was just a regular sort of criminal defense lawyer out in West Texas, which I still am, but I travel all over the place now and get people out of prison. I believe that the fundamental problems of race and class and people's attitudes were so deeply rooted that the idea of having an adversarial system was not enough to overcome it. Then I began to realize, especially if I started doing this work and seeing what landed people in prison, that our system of justice adversarially operating in a way that it's supposed to actually does work. The problem is that when we allow politically that system to be gamed politically for an advantage, okay, by one side, which is what we've got now. One side that can operate without real fear of punishment, namely the state, prosecutors, police, judges who are usually in that group. You get what happens here. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. When I said the general idea that we have abstractly is wonderful. And if you allow it to work, with a defense over here and a prosecution over here and some basic rules in play, it does work and innocent people don't get convicted. We don't have that in Texas. What we have by design in Texas is a system that routinely screws over poor people and people of color by not providing them with an adequate lawyer, which can't be had in Texas if you're poor. We don't have a public defender system of any kind. What we have for a system here is judicial cronyism of $300 appointments that are handed out to the worst lawyers in town in any given community. As long as the system is not allowed to work like that, and that's not allowing it to work, we're going to continue to see wrongful convictions. These are problems that you can actually solve. We can have a public defender system. We don't want one. Texas is a reflection, and I think our criminal justice system is a reflection of what, generally speaking, the majority of Texans want. And that's bad stuff. They don't want to spend money on poor people or justice. We don't want to do that at all in this state. And until that changes, we're going to wind up having what we have. We have a very politically centric system. We have elected judges, elected prosecutors. And I think in many counties of the state, in fact, really every one of them to one extent or another, they reflect what people want. People want maximum punishments. People want death penalties. People want to feel good about themselves through the punishment of others. And we elect people who seem to deliver that. And that, I think, is what I mean when I say, ideally, we have a system that ought to work. Practically speaking, and by design in Texas, we have a system that cannot work.
At the same time, Dennis, wouldn't you think that people, while they may want those things that Jeff said, they want those maximum punishments to be with the right people?
I wish I could say yes. And I'm speaking now as for a period of time, I was the director of our survey research program, and annually we conducted a crime poll, Texas crime poll, that was used to help inform legislators about issues related to crime and justice. And one of the surveys we completed examined specifically this issue about whether or not people felt that the criminal justice system was functioning properly, and more importantly, if they thought that capital offenders were being represented adequately. And unfortunately, most of the respondents specified that they really didn't worry about error, that they believed that the system was operating the way that it should be. And even if there were errors being made, the people were probably guilty of something. And so they might not have been guilty of this particular crime, but they probably did something. So they aren't as worried about this as you or I or any perhaps deliberatively thoughtful person might be. I also suggest that this is not a Texas syndrome. This is, at some point in time, from my estimation, the United States became Texanized. Because at one time there may have been a difference across jurisdiction, but I've done an annual survey, a nationwide survey examining this very issue. And people in Michigan and people in Wisconsin are the same as people in Texas on this particular issue. Yeah, we might get it wrong sometimes, but when we get it wrong, it's wrong in the particular sense, but they probably did something wrong anyway, and so it's not as big a problem as we might think it is.
So this idea that you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, right?
Sure.
Anthony, as one of those eggs, right? That obviously that's not acceptable, right? So what do you think is specifically can be done to keep cases like yours from happening?
I mean, first of all, I think that if we're going to do any structural change, it has to start with the attitude, okay? Because we all feel that when someone is arrested, more than likely they've done the crime. We watch TV, we watch the news, and when they have someone in handcuffs and they put them in the car, we usually say, did you see what they guy did?
Do you feel that way? After what you've been through, still, with you,
yes,
when you see it on TV?
I still feel that way. I still see things on TV and says, wow, how could that guy do that? And he hasn't even had a trial yet. So he's been convicted by public opinion before they even put him in the courtroom. And the reason why is because we want to believe that our system gets it right. We need to believe that. It's our security blanket. Because what if we didn't believe it? You know, what if we just really thought that we were arresting and convicted wrong people? We wouldn't feel so secure about our system anymore. Okay, and we'd probably actually get involved and try to make changes. Well, let me just share this with you. We are convicting wrong people. And we are actually executing some of them. So, when you look at the television and you see that guy's in handcuffs, don't convict him already. Give him a fair trial. I think it just has to start with the attitude. It's us against them against us. It's what have us in this situation. It should be about seeking justice from both sides. And both sides should work together to make that happen. But you don't hear that. The prosecutor talked about the defense talked about the prosecutor. They dug in and everybody's trying to win. But that poor guy sitting up there, he's the pawn. Because at the end of the day, whoever wins or whoever loses, they still go home. He has to deal with the outcome. So I say that when you do look at those televisions and you see those guys, you would say to yourself, I hope I get a jury summons to go down there and find out what really happened. See, part of our breakdown is that we don't take our jury duty seriously. We always leave it up to everybody else to go do it. We're too busy to get it done. Well, then, if that's the case, you're part of the problem. Because for our system to work, we all have to be involved. I always say it's like a car. It has different parts to it. You have the engine, you have the brakes, you have everything. If one part is not operating right, that car becomes dangerous. We're part of this car. We are the overseers of our system. We are the boss of those that we entrust with our system. But we have to understand that. Our vote, we have to take more seriously. We have to start knowing who are those candidates that we're putting in office. Then we start changing things. But when you're just going up there and you vote them in because you heard their name before, that's a popular name, and he's the same guy that's up there talking about taking your liberties, your rights, that's on you. That's on me. It's not just the system. We are all part of this system, and we all have to make it work.
Anthony, in your case, I know that you have asked for the prosecutor in your case to be punished in several ways for overlooking or not making public possible exculpatory evidence in your favor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I filed a grievance. I took advantage of a new piece of legislation that was passed, Senate Bill 825, which gives you up to 4 years to come back and file a grievance on the prosecutor once you've been exonerated. When I first got out, it wasn't in place. So someone had filed a grievance on my behalf and they denied it. They didn't use the statute to deny it. They basically denied it on the merits without really looking at it. Their saving grace is that this bill was passed, so now they can hide and say, well, it was statute of limitations. But I filed this grievance against this prosecutor for wrongfully convicting me like this. Basically, not so much because it was just, I want to get him back. No. I want to empower you. I want you to know that you can stand up for yourself when someone does you wrong. Even someone such as a prosecutor who has this blanket immunity. I want you to know about this new bill, because I feel like the more we know, the more empowered we become. And so I'm doing this to show citizens in our society that, look, we have to hold these people accountable. It's the only way we can get this system to work. And you as the boss has to hold your employees accountable. And those are those that we elect. So I'm doing this basically to stand up for us and say that we need to hold them accountable. I'm his boss. And that's what I'm doing.
Jeff, I know my guess would be a lot of citizens sort of would draw a line between honest mistakes within the prosecution or within the system that allowed honest mistakes to happen versus a prosecution, and I'm not talking about Anthony's case specifically, but any case, that ignored evidence of innocence and said, look, we got to get someone, here's our guy, we're going to follow this path. How often do you see that being the problem? That whether it's blinders or whether they really don't believe the person is guilty, but they've decided that this is who they're going to convict because they've got to convict someone.
Okay, well, there's sort of good news and bad news in things. The good news is, again, and this kind of blew me away when I really began to figure it out. If you allow the system to work, it does. I mean, I can tell you, in Colorado, for example, there is a judicial system that basically works pretty well. They have a statewide public defender system. It's very well funded. Very, very good lawyers work for it. Result, they've had one DNA exoneration. You allow the system to work, and it does. That's the good news. Again, the bad news is we don't allow that. However, even there's a little silver lining, because I was sitting up here thinking, what kind of defeatist do you all have to think we all are? We're talking about either big sort of completely unsolvable problems like people's attitude and education, or we're saying, well, there's nothing that can be done. I think there's a lot that can be done. You just have to understand the real nature of the problem. I mean, my project has been involved very actively in getting a lot of legislation passed. We usually do it as a result of a case like Tim Cole's, which resulted in a great compensation statute. Texas now is the best one. We're very far ahead of the game with forensic science and a lot of other issues. But it's because we have a very deliberate long-term plan, a 30-year plan, in fact, to reform the system. So it's not a matter of just saying, oh, well, people's attitudes are terrible. The system can actually work, and I hope this is answering the question, if we allow it to do so, and if we pass some laws, a lot of laws, that can fix parts of it. Ultimately, the most important thing, though, is that we have got to provide a structure whereby, like many other states do, whereby poor people get properly defended. If that happens, the system really does work. I don't see a lot of honest accidents, honest mistakes. I can tell you that in all the wrongful conviction cases that I've done, every single one of them, there has been some element of dishonesty, deceit, political ambition on the part of prosecutors or judges at play. Every single one. There came a point where they couldn't play by the rules and get done what they wanted to do. They would have looked stupid. They would have maybe not gotten elected. They would have been embarrassed. Again, if we allow the system to work, it really does. The problem we have in Texas is, there's, like Anthony pointed out, until we passed that law, which was done in the wake of the Michael Morton case, there was no way to even go after prosecutors. I know out of the Tulia case, that guy, I represented the 38 of those 49 defendants that got out, or the 49 total, 38 of them came from the Tulia case. Finally, years later, I think he got a private reprimand or something. So the bar has been very reluctant to do it. We don't punish wrongdoing, and as long as we don't punish wrongdoing, people are going to do wrong because it works out for them that way.
Dennis, I know you want to weigh in on that, and I also want to ask you about how we know how it affects the individual who's wrongfully convicted. Anthony paid a horrible price. It's a price that, in a sense, he's still paying because he lost those years of his life. But we're all paying a price as well, and we do when the system doesn't work. But I know you wanted to comment on what Jeff is saying specifically.
It's a good segue into both of those comments. First of all, again, to expand it beyond Texas, the data that I'm drawing from is nationwide data looking at 352 exonerations that occurred throughout the United States, including some in Texas. 37% of those exonerations involved government misconduct by the prosecution or the judge during the trial that is incontrovertible. It was just simply, it wasn't that they were lazy, they were intentionally misrepresenting factual information in order to win the case. Now, our justice system is not set up to win cases. It is to provide procedural constraints to make sure that information that is being considered by a jury or a judge, should it just be a sentencing judge, is acceptable and admissible information, and that it has some sense of reality associated to it with it. 37% of the exonerations involved government misconduct, including coaching witnesses at lineup, coerced confessions, threatening witnesses, threatening family members of witnesses, offering immunity for statements that are going to be made, eliciting perjured testimony, destroying, concealing, or fabricating evidence, and making improper and inflammatory statements during the prosecution itself. This is unacceptable, and it can't be remedied without some way to hold those government officials accountable for what they are doing. They aren't doing it because it's an accident. They aren't doing it because they just missed something. This is intentional and deliberative, and I think that one of the things that we need to think about are ways to hold those individuals not just civilly but criminally accountable for what they are doing, because they are ruining people's lives and they are putting people's families in jeopardy and all kinds of issues that are frightening. Bad lawyering doesn't stop at the state. It also affects defense counsel. We've got horror stories of defense attorneys who are arrested for DWI on the way back from lunch to try a capital case. People who are asleep during the testimony so they can't effectively cross-examine witnesses. The defense bar is in need of significant improvement in order for us to be able to move forward. What does this do to us as a society? How does it affect us at large? I can't even begin to imagine how it affects Anthony and other people who have gone through the horror of being wrongfully convicted of a crime that could take your life. My data set includes all kinds of exonerations, not only capital exonerations, but they're horrible experiences, I'm sure, nonetheless. But one of the things that we need to think about is how we can begin to hold the legal community more accountable, and or at least make them live up to their oaths and to their promises that they're going to represent their clients. It costs us tremendously in terms of just the fiscal costs. Let me give you some examples. And I'm not going to go into the specific details, but every state has compensation plans. It costs over $1 million to try a capital case. If you try the capital case and you do it with an innocent person, they are exonerated and you have to try a second one. It's going to cost you double the money. Not to mention the expense that we spend keeping the people incarcerated for the long periods of time we do so. And so the costs are fiscal costs immediately. If they are exonerated, there are remuneration policies that are in effect in a lot of states that provide some effort to compensate the individuals for their terms of confinement, wrongful terms of confinement. That costs the taxpayers money, and it rightly should, because it's our responsibility. But more importantly, there's a body of research that shows that people who read about, hear, or even personally experience the criminal justice system and its flagrant disregard for justice leave their experiences with a tainted sense of justice at large. They have very little confidence in the criminal justice system at large. They don't cooperate when police contact them for potential information about crimes that have occurred in their community. They don't want to talk to the police. They don't want to talk to the prosecution because it's all a game. It's all a scam. So it undermines our fundamental sense of confidence in the criminal justice system at large when we hear about these cases, and it continues to do it on a day-to-day basis. And it undermines it much more significantly for people who are more likely than others to be targeted in this system of criminal injustice. Ethnic minorities, males are particularly focused on, are particularly victims of this kind of wrongful conviction and wrongful prosecution.
Anthony, Dennis said we can't imagine the personal toll on an individual. Can you tell us a little bit about, we know you lost 18 years of your life. What else? What else did you lose? How are you different today? And first of all, let me say that having, we got to have dinner together before this panel, talk a little bit. You're really an amazing guy because you've got a positive attitude and you are out there working to help other kids and just do great things, which is really cool because you have other choices than doing that thing, and that's what you've chosen. But you're still not the same person you were prior to 1992.
No, and I could never be. People always ask me, what I always hear people say, I can't imagine what you went through. And I tell them, please don't try, because you're going to need counseling. Okay, because what I went through was hell. And whatever you think your hell is, I did that every day, 365 days. I was in solitary confinement 16 of the 18 and a half years that I was incarcerated. I was behind steel doors, no television, nothing but my thoughts. And that is a roller coaster that can really destroy the essence of a man. You would hear voices. I've seen people cut their throats, drop their appeals, hang themselves, not because they didn't think they could win the case itself, but the conditions, totally inhumane and dehumanizing. And that's what you're subjected to. So you lose a lot, you grow up under unique circumstances. So everything that is small to you become magnified to me. Turning a doorknob just to go outside. How many of you take that for granted? That's a blessing to me, But these little things we just take for granted. But when you're back there and you're hopeless and you're afraid and you're losing your mind, you find yourself talking to yourself to try to stay sane. You can't turn the door and come out and say, I don't want to play anymore. It doesn't work like that. You just have to dig deep inside of yourself, find a piece of yourself that they haven't touched, and hold on to it. Okay? That's the only way you can do it. I'm telling you, I was a young man, came down there, he was like 20 years old when I first seen him. 2 years later, this young man didn't even know his name. This young man standing up at the door at 2 and 3 in the morning, yelling and screaming, because he think he hear people talking about it. He paranoid now, schizophrenic. This is what these conditions do. And they were doing that to men who didn't even deserve to be there. I was one in particular. How I maintained, I don't know. I was naive, I always say, because I just believed that our system would work. Okay, even though I seen over 300 men murdered around me, some with little to no evidence on their cases, I just still held on to this naivete that we have the greatest system in the world. That's how I was taught in my school, and there's just no way they can do me like this. But since I've come out and I've traveled the world, I had to find out who I was out here, because when they took my freedom, I was only 26 years old. And when I come back out, I was 45. And I'd never been out here as a 45-year-old man, not even a 30-year-old man. So the whole world was strange to me. I had to find out who I was out here in this world. And it was hard. A lot of nights I cried. Didn't want to be out here. Didn't know if I could make it. You know, I'll be around a whole bunch of people and still felt alone because no one could connect with me. No one understood what I went through. And they'll pat me on my back and they tell me how good I am, but they never seen me cry at night. They never see that I couldn't sleep. I was just waiting for the sun to come up just so I could see some people. Okay, because I'm this close from going over the edge. I didn't see that. But that's how that's changed me to the point I said, you know, I have to get out and do something so that I can make sense of this. So this is why I travel abroad and I try to educate everybody. Because it's my therapy. I need you guys. Because without you, I don't know if I can make it. And so I'm afraid for the next guy that's going to come out. And he's not going to be as strong as me. What are we going to do for him? We are letting men down that we're putting in prison. And then we bring them, send them back. Don't have to be on death row. Guys that are going in prison get a lot of baggage. They come out and they're a greater threat to us. And we're not understanding that. Our prison system is let us down. They're sending back guys worse death, more damage than they were before they went down there. And that is a threat to us. So, but that's what has changed about me. It has caused me to get out here and be a voice for voices.
All right. And obviously that's a discussion for an entire other night. How we handle incarcerations and all of those things. The death penalty is a year-long discussion among people, I suppose. On this topic, gentlemen, we've got a few minutes left, and I want to let each of you say, if we could just talk about the one or two things, specific things that can make this system better. I'm going to start at the end of the table with Dennis. What do we do to make sure that we're convicting the right people so we're safe as a society, but we're not putting the wrong people in prison?
Slow down. You move too fast. The criminal justice system is not designed to be a quick fix to the problem of crime. And I think that what we assume as relatively uneducated citizens is that we have a fix already for the problem of crime, and it's called police, courts, corrections. We need to stop and recognize that by the time the problem gets to the police, it's way out of control, and it may be beyond fixing. We've got to start with very, very early childhood considerations, concerns about how our children are perceiving principles of justice and injustice. We've got to stop and make everyone think about how we administer justice in our society and hope that the people will get on board and recognize that what we need to do is work together to make sure that everybody involved in this system is doing the job to the best of their advantage, that they aren't being short-circuited because they don't have enough funding, they're not being short-circuited because they don't have enough time, they're not being forced to confess. One of the issues associated with wrongful convictions is that not a small number of them involve false confessions, that people just confess because they're tired, they don't want to be continuously harassed and hassled, and they'd rather do 5 years in prison for a crime they didn't do than to be continuously harassed by the prosecution and the police. We've got to slow down and focus our attention on issues that we can work on.
Obviously a great goal, right? But the system will always be reactionary to a sense. A murder happens tonight. Somebody did it, and society, of course, wants the person who did that off the street so they're not a threat to anyone else. So the system's always going to have to react to the events of the day. And obviously there's no perfect society where those things aren't going to happen. Jeff, how do we fix the reaction when those things happen?
Well, look, I don't want to be too simplistic about it. And Dennis, I give you a great deal. I have a lot of respect for your position, and I agree that there's, it's all about people's perception of justice and what we teach kids. But to me, that's very gauzy. That's very, I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's a solution. I don't think there is. That's more of a predicament that we're in as a society. And I think We can spend a lot of time talking about that. What I know about is a justice system that we don't allow to work, that has problems that, unlike many other predicaments out there, are actually fixable. Now, I'll tell you, the first thing, the place we start with is this. We create a real indigent defense system, so that if you're poor and you're accused of crime, you get a fighting chance, and you get real lawyers with real investigators who have real money. And you know what? Eventually, the system starts working after a while. I have seen how this works in other states. Cops don't file phony accusations on people because they know they're going to get caught. Prosecutors don't hide the ball because they're going to get caught by a real lawyer somewhere. Judges don't act like the judges that we have here, because not only they know they're going to get caught, they know they're not going to be judges anymore after they get caught, because there's an institutional counterweight. We don't have that in Texas. There are very Texas-specific problems. And a lot of the attitudinal issues that you pointed out, I totally agree with you on. But I know that there are problems that we can fix. We start there, and I tell you, if we were to create a genuine public defender system, a statewide, well-funded PD system along the lines that they have in Colorado, for example, we wouldn't have hundreds of people on death row. We would not have dozens and dozens and hundreds into the future of exonerations. We wouldn't have any of these issues. So let's start with that problem first.
Great. We have now gone officially 1 minute and 32 seconds over. But Anthony, you've been denied enough time in your life, so I want to have you have the last word. About a minute. What do you think we can do to keep what happened to you from happening again?
I think you just have to put resources at the beginning of the cases. I think you have to make sure that, and this is kind of like piggyback on what Jeff just said. I think you just have to make sure that you have a good lawyer and a good investigation for someone. And that is by putting the resources at the beginning, i.e. expert witnesses, whatever that case needs to make sure that case is fair. You have to put it at the beginning. We have too many entities that are geared toward being the hero at the end. I'm about preventive measures. I said, let's put some resources at the beginning so that we don't have to play hero at the end. So I just think it's about resources at the beginning of the cases.
Very good. Anthony Graves, Jeff Blackburn, I want to make sure I get your name right. I've been calling you Jeff all night. Dennis Longmire, thank you very much. Very interesting input, and obviously a really important topic. Thank you tonight.